In the shadow of the Silver Pine Mountains, where ancient trees whispered secrets to the wind and streams sang gentle songs through meadows of wildflowers, there was a village almost forgotten by time. Life there moved slowly, as if each moment stretched a little longer, allowing people to savor the simplicity. It was in this village that Clara lived, a woman known for her steady hands, her generous heart, and a quiet strength that radiated from her like warmth from a hearth on a cold night. Clara's life, for many years, had been full of light. She was married to Victor, a man who had once been the embodiment of every hope she carried in her youth. He was kind then, full of quiet ambition, building their modest home with his own hands while promising Clara the life they both dreamed of. Together, they had a daughter named Emma, whose bright blue eyes and boundless laughter could lift even the heaviest heart. They lived in a cottage surrounded by wildflowers and towering oaks. Clara kept a garden that flourished under her careful touch. Herbs for cooking and healing, roses that climbed up the old wooden fence, and marigolds that turned their faces to the sun. Emma ran barefoot through the grass, collecting petals and chasing dragonflies, while Victor worked at the village mill and came home each evening with stories and laughter. For 6 years, it was a good life, or so Clara thought, the slow unraveling. But happiness, she learned, can be fragile. It can fray quietly at the edges before you ever notice. It began with Victor losing one of his oldest friends, a terrible accident at the mill. Victor changed after that. At first, it was small things. He grew quieter, more distant, staring at nothing for long stretches of time. Then came the nights at the tavern. He drank to forget, or perhaps to remember. Clara was never sure. But it dulled something in him, and what dulled in his heart grew sharp at his tongue. At first, Clara told herself it was temporary. Grief worked in strange ways. She comforted him, stood by him, hoping he would find his way back to her. But instead, the man she loved drifted further away. The drinking worsened. Victor became impatient, irritable. Little things set him off. Emma's laughter too loud, Clara's quiet suggestions mistaken for criticism. Then he lost his job. He stopped trying to find another. Days bled into nights with him sitting at the table, bottle in hand, eyes clouded. He would shout over nothing, sometimes slamming his fists against the wood, rattling the entire house. The Victor Clara had married was slipping through her fingers, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. Still, she stayed. For Emma. For the family she had dreamed of. She told herself he just needed time, that things would get better. But deep inside, a voice whispered that they wouldn't. The breaking point. It was a warm afternoon in late summer. The air smelled sweet, thick with honeysuckle and the distant promise of rain. Clara knelt by her garden, trimming basil, while Emma played nearby with daisies, weaving their white petals into a little crown. Clara heard Victor before she saw him. His boots scraped harshly against the stone path, his steps unsteady. She looked up to see him stumble into the yard, bottle dangling from one hand, his face red and twisted with anger. "You think this is enough?" he snarled, his voice rough like gravel. "You think you can just sit here playing house while I rot inside?" Clara rose slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, heart pounding but voice calm. "Victor, why don't we go inside? Emma's out here." But reason had long left him. He stomped closer, his shadow falling across Clara. "Don't tell me what to do. You think you're better than me." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her flinch. Then he shoved her. Clara fell back into the dirt, the breath knocked from her lungs. She lay there stunned for a heartbeat. And then she heard Emma's cry, a sound that tore right through her chest. "Mama!" Emma's little feet pounded across the grass, but she froze halfway, her hands trembling at her sides, her bright blue eyes wide with terror. And then the world shifted. The arrival of the wolf. From the edge of the forest, where shadows stretched long beneath the ancient pines, a figure emerged. At first, Clara thought it was a trick of the light. But then it stepped into view, and her breath caught in her throat. A wolf, but not like any wolf she had ever heard of in stories. He was enormous, his coat shimmering silver and white, catching the sunlight like moonlight on fresh snow. His eyes, icy blue and unblinking, were locked on Victor. The wolf moved with quiet power, padding closer to the fence that bordered their yard. He made no sound, yet the ground seemed to hum beneath Clara's hands. He growled low, a deep rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself, and bared his fangs in a slow, deliberate warning. Victor stumbled backward, the bottle slipping from his grasp and shattering on the stones. His face drained of color as he stared at the beast before him. The drunken rage that had filled him just moments ago drained away, replaced by fear so pure he could hardly stand. But the wolf did not advance. He stood perfectly still, his gaze never leaving Victor, his body coiled but calm. It was as if he was waiting for Victor to understand exactly why he was there. And then, just as silently as he had arrived, the wolf turned. Without a sound, he slipped back into the trees, his silver coat vanishing into the shadows. The choice. For a long time, no one spoke. Clara sat up slowly, Emma rushing into her arms, sobbing quietly against her chest. Victor stood frozen, staring after the wolf long after it was gone. That night, Clara made her choice. She packed what she could: clothes for Emma, a few cherished belongings, and a small leather pouch holding her mother's locket. She took only what they needed, knowing there was no room for anything else. Before dawn, Clara and Emma left. They didn't say goodbye. Victor never stirred as they walked away from the only home Emma had ever known. Clara held her daughter's hand tightly, the early morning mist curling around their feet like ghosts of what they were leaving behind. The new beginning. They walked until their legs ached, and then they walked farther still until they reached a town Clara had only heard stories about. It was a quiet place, filled with people who minded their own business but smiled when you met their eyes. Clara found work at a bakery, rising before the sun to knead dough and bake loaves that smelled like home. Emma started school, making friends who laughed easily and shared their lunches. They found a small apartment above the bakery. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, and it was safe. Clara never spoke of Victor. She didn't need to. The past was behind them now. But the wolf, that she never forgot, the symbol of strength. In time, Clara became a quiet figure of hope for other women who came to her bakery. Some had bruises that weren't from clumsy steps. Some had eyes that rarely met your own. They whispered their stories over loaves of bread and cups of tea. And Clara listened. She never judged. She never rushed them. And when they were ready, she told them about the day the silver wolf came. Not to terrify, but to protect. To remind them there was a strength inside them waiting to be claimed. She wore her mother's locket every day, now holding a tiny engraving of a wolf's head inside. Emma grew into a strong, kind young woman, teaching others that bravery doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you choose to stand anyway. And every now and then, when the wind blew in from the mountains, Clara would walk to the edge of town, and she swore, in the distance, she could see a flash of silver moving between the trees. It made her smile, because she knew she had been protected once. But more importantly, she had learned how to protect herself and those she loved forever after. Sparkles, thank you for joining me on this powerful journey of courage, hope, and the strength we all hold deep within. If this story touched your heart, give it a like, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that inspire and empower. There's so much more to share, and I can't wait to bring you along for the next one. Sparkles.